Today at Speedy's Garage we're going to be changing the spark plugs in Orange Crush. I went with a NGK Iridium number 6619. This spark plug is one step colder than the stock spark plugs. It's a gasket seat, which is what the 5.7 Hemi requires. The difference is on a 6.1 this gasket wouldn't be here and this lip would be shaved at like a 45-degree angle or so. So you want to be sure to get the spark plug specific to your application. Since the heads are aluminum, when you torque these down, if you go with a taper seat plug, which I've heard of people doing without any problems, but you just couldn't ever go back to a gasket seat. But since these were available and exactly what I needed, I went ahead and just got the gasket seat plugs. With Iridium plugs, you have to be a little bit more careful with the gapping. That tip can break off and then the plug's ruined. So here's a tool that you can get. Mine's a Craftsman, it says 40801. It's got a small tool on the end of it that you can use to bend the electrode without ever touching the tip. And then it also has these different size wires that set the gap range. It's also got these, but on the Iridium plugs I use those right there. Now the way you use this tool is you have the electrode facing you. You hook the tool on the end of the electrode and then use the leverage just to bend it. And just do it a little bit at a time and then take one of your wire guides. Let's see what size we want. We'll use 0.028. My car's supercharged, so I tighten the gap a little bit based on the engine builder recommendations. So you just, till it barely touches, you just want to barely feel it. That's how you know you've got it gapped correctly. Now besides the spark plugs, and by the way in the Hemi it takes 16 spark plugs, 2 per cylinder. I was a little bit disappointed in that, but I guess Dodge had to do it to make the car emissions compliant. You're going to need a torque wrench that does foot-pounds as well as inch-pounds. The inch-pounds is probably optional. It's just for the coil pack cover bolts that are 106 inch-pounds, but you can just snug them up. It's a plastic coil pack, so just don't break it. 3/8 ratchet, a couple of 10mm sockets, and I picked up some of these. I actually came in a kit by KD Tools. Got that from Amazon. These are spark plug sockets with extensions on them. The socket itself does not come off, so it won't drop off in the head. And they're also magnetized. Pretty strong magnet. So, and it's 5/8 for the Hemi. I also like to put some anti-seize on the spark plug threads, just to keep them from corroding and getting stuck in the head. And then I always put a little bit of dielectric grease in the coil pack boots. First thing you want to do is remove the coil pack cover bolts. They're 10mm. Next, just disconnect the electrical connector and you just push on it and pull up. And then work the coil pack out. That's it. There's your 2 spark plug holes. Next, just use your spark plug socket, and I found the 6-inch works the best out of that KD kit that I have. Just drop it in. Connect your 3/8 ratchet. And once I break them loose, I always do everything else by hand. The spark plug threads are real fine and the heads are aluminum, so I just never like to take any chances of stripping or cross threading or any kind of problems like that, so I always just take them out by hand. There you go. That's why you want a magnetic socket, so that it holds the plug. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. These got about 12,500 miles on them. Most of those miles were supercharged. And you can see the difference in a colder plug. See how the ceramic insulator is farther into the spark plug. And on the part numbers, at least on the NGK ones, that 6 denotes it's a heat range 6. Whereas on the stock plug, it's a heat range 5. Now I'm just going to put a little anti-seize on the threads. And this will make it much easier down the road to swap spark plugs in the future. It'll keep the two metals from corroding against each other, because the heads are aluminum and this is steel. That's why you do it. Just don't get any on the electrode. That one's ready to go in. Now, I've been talking about using one heat range colder spark plug in my car. The reason I'm doing that is because the car is supercharged. For a stock car, obviously you use the stock specified plug, and if you have a built motor or something like that, just use the spark plug your builder recommends. Now, it's particularly important when you're reinstalling spark plugs to always start them by hand. Go real gently, make sure you feel the threads catch. So that one's good. Then you want to torque these. For the 5.7 liter Hemi, the torque specification is 13 foot-pounds. Now, once you have the spark plugs replaced in one cylinder, just put a dab of dielectric grease in each of the coil cover boots. It's ready to reinstall. Then just put your 10mm bolts back on, and the torque setting on those is 106 inch-pounds. Make sure it's an inch-pound wrench, and then reconnect your electrical connection. Now, the torque setting on the spark plugs is 13 foot-pounds. That's what the manual calls for. However, since I used a 6-inch extension to get to the spark plugs, I added 2 foot-pounds to make up for that extension. So I actually torqued mine to 15, but if you want to know what the book says, it's 13. On most modern cars, you'll have a coil pack per cylinder. So it's pretty straightforward as to which coil pack goes to which cylinder, which wire goes to which coil pack and all that, but you definitely don't want to mix these wires up. This one's going to be pretty hard to make any mistakes on because the distance of the wire will only let it go to its specific coil pack. However, if on your car, if these are longer, or it can become confusing as to which coil pack connector goes to which coil pack, just do the cylinders one at a time, and when this one's complete, move on to the next one, and etc. On older cars, you'll have a distributor cap, which looks like a big cup, and you'll have all the spark plug wires coming out of that cup, and they'll run all over the place. So on one of those types of vehicles, I'll always do them one cylinder at a time, so I never make any mix-ups on the spark plug wires, because the engine won't fire correctly if you do. Changing spark plugs is really basic maintenance. I almost didn't even do this video, but I thought there might be somebody out there that could benefit from it. I've been swapping spark plugs in equipment since I was probably 8 years old, and one of the things I learned very quickly was to always start the spark plug by hand. I actually messed up a cylinder head on a 3-wheeler when I was a kid because I used a wrench to start it. So that's a very important lesson learned when I was 9 years old. Other than that, it's a pretty easy job. Takes about 45 minutes on this car. You can find more Challenger information at my website, www.speedysgarage.net.